So. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is January 13, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Joellen Lapidus. Is that the right way to say it?
You got it.
Joellen, what a pleasure and an honor. I really appreciate it. Where the heck are you calling in from?
Culver City, not far from you.
Well, the first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
What is the best thing for a human being? Not to have things in your life that you enjoy, people in your life that you feel good about, challenges that make you grow.
That's good. Let's go with that. So, what's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
That's an interesting question because I'm a big fan of this concept that Carl Jung put out, which is that people get information in 4 different ways. Some people are sensory, like people who are dancers and athletes. That's the way they get most of their info. Some people are more intellectual. They get most of their information through concepts. Some people are more feelings oriented, and everything is interpreted through feelings. And some people are more intuitive. And that's harder to describe, but it's not exactly visible like the body, the brain, or feelings. But I would say my favorite way is intuitive and intellectual. I love them all, though. I really love them all, because what Jung said is that for you to be a fulfilled human being, you really had to develop the opposite of what your main one. But the American Indians say you have to go around the circle and develop all of them. And I prefer that interpretation.
Wow, you loaded me with a lot there, so I'm overwhelmed. So what's the second? No, because we have a Carl Jung reading club, and it's like, wow, this hasn't even come up yet. So was the second one the word concepts? I didn't hear. Did you?
Let's see. The first one, usually I start with the brain, the intellectual. That would be concepts.
Oh, concept is brain. Yeah. So you said
intellectual,
sensory,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sensory one, concepts is brain, intellectual. Third is feelings, and fourth is intuition.
Right.
And then you told me something before the Indians use all 4 of them. What did you say?
Well, Carl Jung said to individuate, which he thought happened in the late 20s, early 30s. I think it can happen at any time, actually, but that you had to develop the opposite. He was into anima, animus. He was into these opposites, very binary, like our culture. But the American Indians have a more circular approach, and they have what they call the medicine wheel. And when you go around the medicine wheel, you develop all of them. It's not a matter of opposites. I like that better. I think that makes a lot more sense.
Medicine wheel. Wow. So you're saying Jung said to individuate, if you're a sports sensory person, that you should develop the opposite of the sports sensory, which might be concept.
Intellect. Right.
It would be intellect. I got you. Amazing. Wow. Mind blowing. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
To survive. I mean, we have to. Right. Every living thing gathers information in some form or another. You have to know where the air is, the food, whatever you grow on. You have to know where it is.
But do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
That's actually an easy question to answer. Let me tell you why I think it's easy.
Yeah.
It's definitely innate.
Yeah.
However, to survive, it has to be developed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's both,
Yeah. Yeah, some of these questions at the beginning are, is it more this or more that? It's just prompts to talk. So you get where we're going for here. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
I don't know what I think until I. Actually, I get an intuitive feeling that it's clicked.
Yeah, that is beautiful. That it has clicked. There's a lot going on there. So, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I write it. So can humans think without language?
That's an interesting question. I've never even thought about that. Can humans think without language? Well, do animals think that? Do birds think? Sure, of course.
See,
All mammals think. I mean,
yeah,
insects think. It's just not.
but that's but it's sort of anthropomorphizing because we've decided what humans do, we call it thinking. And then we go, oh, that's what animals do. So we think by their actions that our words apply to them. And that's fine. It helps suss out the big picture. I'm glad. But you really got it, Joellen, because what you did was the first thing that you said was two new questions. So I'm for inventing new questions and new metaphors. I'm for you sussing it out. But immediately you said, well, do animals think? And that was beautiful. So Chomsky says that language is not just words. It is a culture, it's a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, the only thing that's happening when we speak is not language. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of other data coming
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting things is when somebody says something to you and it's totally, what's the word? Discordant with what the information you get. That's a really interesting moment because some people register it and some people ignore it.
Yeah. But
So
what
I
do you?
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I think there's more than just words going on whenever we talk. Texting is interesting because it kind of is a skeleton.
Yeah.
And, it's like, here's an interesting topic. As you know, one of the things I do is I'm a psychotherapist. What's the difference between all this teletherapy and in-person therapy?
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to think about what's different. And what I find interesting is some people do better with the teletherapy and some people hate it and do better with the in-person.
Yeah.
So maybe it has to do with how they, which one of the four ways of accessing information is going on.
Yeah.
But I don't really know.
But if you were in a grocery store and you're talking to someone and there's a communication breakdown, what do you usually do? Or, you're talking to one of your students, you're teaching them dulcimer and there's a communication breakdown. What's your next step? What do you do?
Well, it depends whether hostility has been generated or not. I was in the grocery store of good old Vaughn's on Centinela, and I was talking to this guy, and he was ignoring me. So I was starting to get a little annoyed until he turned around and he told me he was deaf.
Wow.
And then, of course, with that information, everything changed.
Yep.
So that was kind of interesting because I was starting to get a little irritated. And
yeah.
Well, so go ahead.
Well, this is a general question that's stupid, but it's basically your hunch your intuition. Are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings? I know it's both and it depends, but like your observations of humans. Good laugh. You get it. We're out to have fun.
Well, you're trying to do a binary on me. You know, it's
That's
like we're
right.
we're
But
both. I know.
yeah,
We're both, but it
But
depends on the person. Like
yeah,
I find that a lot of people with bipolar disorder
yeah,
tend to be feeling people.
yeah.
What they feel is the truth.
That's right.
If they're depressed, that's the truth. If they're high as a bird in the sky, that's the truth. And
Yeah.
more so than other disorders, I find. And I find it curious because I am not a mainly feeling person. So when I observe that, it's just fascinating to me. It's like another species,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it's funny because, 80% of people say we're more feeling beings. And and, and it's funny, and I mean, my favorite was a woman. I asked her a couple months ago. I says, "Are we more feeling or more thinking?" She goes, "The word more doesn't function in your question." Because I mean, really, it's me and you versus the wording on these questions. I'm for like molding and substituting other words and like flushing them out. So these are two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
You're making me laugh because you're using words that you're not defining. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll answer that question if you can define the soul for me.
Right. That's what 90% of people say. It depends on what you mean by the soul. So that's fine. I mean, we know there's general, it's like Lily Tomlin said, reality's a collective hunch. So there's some words that collectively we get a feeling, like when you said texting, we get a feeling, we know what texting is, me and you and in the general public. But that's fine. We can move on because there's so much to explore. And a lot of the themes will come back around. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Well, if I had to answer this on Jeopardy, what I would say is if we limit the definition of thinking, they absolutely are thinking.
That's good. My friend, yeah, I want you to meet him someday. He was the head writer on Jeopardy for 10 years. I go, that you win, bingo. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
That's like saying, do you cook with the steel or the Teflon in a frying pan? I don't think you can. I don't think you can. I don't think you can separate them, Jerry.
That's fine. But where I got it. You might be familiar with where I got it. It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning book. He says that meaning lasts and happiness doesn't necessarily last. So, anyways, here's a good one for psychotherapists. And someone who brought up Jung. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
Gosh, I wish I could remember the name of this guy. Oh, God. I wrote this guy's memoirs, and one of the philosophers that he referred to, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he felt that thinking was more like being a radio receiver.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting concept. It really changes how you think about thinking. And I like the idea of the collective consciousness, the Jung's idea.
Yeah.
And so I think thinking takes place in the brain, but it also takes place in a very larger sphere of energy. I think it takes place outside of the body as well as inside the body.
Yeah. No, you're anticipating a lot of stuff we're talking about. So that's good. Let's move on. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Dexedrine.
You know,
I have no idea. I have no idea, but I would
look at Dexedrine was the best answer I ever got. That's good. No, Audre Lorde, the poet, Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
I have to really think about what you just said. First of all, why would you want to dismantle the master's house? What reason would you have for it? And if it's an intellectual house, you don't need tools. If it's a wooden house, you need tools. If it's a brick house, but I don't know. I would have no desire to dismantle somebody's house unless.
That's good. And there's some metaphor going on, but it's all right. Let's move on because you'll see things come around. What new toy do you suggest?
Toy?
Yeah. What toy do you gravitate towards? What new toy? Or it doesn't have to be new. Like if I say the word new in a question, you don't have to apply the word new. So
I really enjoy badminton and ping pong. I think those are fabulous.
Good
toys. Fabulous toys.
See, you didn't even go metaphorical. That's badminton and ping pong are two of my faves. Great. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
What do I worry about when I go to bed at night? Well, currently I'm working on this dulcimer, and I worry I'm not going to finish it before 2 years, because sometimes it takes me up to 2 years to make an instrument, and I really don't want to take 2 years. But it's going to be May is going to be 2 years, so I'm hoping that that's not happening.
Right. Beautiful. So now this is what you brought up with your philosopher memoirs comment.
Yeah.
Similar. So Marshall McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might be able to cope with what we don't like about them. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us? And, by artists, I mean writers, poets, musicians,
right.
Garbage collectors, anybody. It's not to be elitist,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, this is a word I hardly use, but I really like it. But things get reified. It's kind of like culture gets. I was listening to the radio today on NPR, one of the NPRs, and this photographer was saying that he realized that he was taking all these pictures of his father so that after his father was dead, he could keep his father alive through these pictures. He would have saved moments of his father.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the difference between energy and matter. Matter is solid, and things tend to turn into solids. And once they thought becomes religion, thought becomes theory, and then the people who hold those religions or theories don't really like it when you show things that don't fit in their paradigm.
Yeah.
People just don't like it. It's almost like putting a poison in somebody's coffee in the morning. I think that's just the process of things being solid. And
Yeah.
So
You really get, yeah. The world's in flux. Everything's always changing, but we think we need to define things and make them solid. So then we think, then we get it. You know.
Well, even some artists do that. I mean, artists are guilty of being human too.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, that's why McLuhan was, you know, they call him a media theorist. And he goes, I'm not a theorist. He's like a charlatan, and he's just telling jokes, but he's in academia. So if you call him a media theorist, the people go along with you. Yeah, just call me that. Right. But you know, and then they don't get him really, but it's enough. They get him. But do artists have moral obligation?
That's a really good question. I mean, but the thing is, sometimes artists have different morals than the rest of the population. So they're adhering to their own moral obligations.
Yeah. Well, most people go, yeah, everybody has a moral obligation, or they go to themselves. And it's like, no, artists are supposed to, you know, bring up stuff that we don't, or not supposed to. Artists can bring up stuff that we might not consider and might go, that's not moral. And then we're going to learn or have new epiphanies or get upset or have some feeling. But yeah, most people think, you know, they have moral obligation, and that's fine. You know, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm afraid of people who try to force me to think in a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of ideas. I like ideas. I love ideas.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
One of my earliest memories?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have actually a very pleasant early memory of me sitting in a high chair in my kitchen in Brooklyn. And my mother is ironing, and we're listening to Rien de Rien by Edith Piaf on the.
Oh my God. Isn't that beautiful? And is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Memory is necessary.
Yeah. Tell me someone with, please, in your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
So somebody in my family and somebody not in my family.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had an aunt who had a huge impact on me. My parents were pretty straight, you know, the 50s. My mother was more of a feminist. So was my father. I mean, my mother worked, but they were pretty straight and narrow when it came to, I don't know, just pretty regular things. But my aunt, and she broke the rules. You know, she was divorced. She was very sexual. She was on that show way back in the 50s or 60s where people danced. It was before Dick Clark. There was a show before Dick Clark.
Yeah.
And she had affairs. She dressed really wildly. She was in fact, I get probably a lot of my artistic skill from that side of the family.
Wow.
And I get my engineering skill from my father. So, That's a great combination, engineering and art.
Isn't that's science and art? Boom. But how much, just on your dad for a second, how much do you think it's actual DNA, and how much did he teach you this sense of engineering? I know it's nature nurture, but would you
It's
say,
both. It's both.
but is it 50-50, or would you say it's like 60-40? What's your sort of guess? Just 50-50, or
51-49.
which one's 51?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Which one is 51?
The genes, or the like?
I think the genes.
Yeah,
Just
genes had a
I,
little.
I have just an innate way of figuring out
Yeah,
the problems when I'm doing woodworking.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, my brain knows how to do that.
yeah,
Whereas when it comes to artistic things, it's more like an intuitive.
yeah,
I mean, maybe the other is intuitive too,
yeah.
because usually I just stare at a problem and eventually the solution comes to me.
Yeah. Oscar Wilde said, "Women fret becoming their mothers, men don't. That's their problem." So
Cool.
now, outside your immediate family.
Oh, outside. Well, one of the biggest influences on me. Let me think about this for a minute. I know who I was going to say, but
Well, you can name a couple. Just be, it's not, you don't
well,
have to go.
my encounter with Joni Mitchell had a huge effect on me.
Yeah.
That was the first working artist I ever met in person and who thought what I was doing was fantastic. And she gave me a boost, a mentoring boost
Yeah.
like no other.
What age are you when you're meeting her?
20. I was 20. I was living in Big
Your
Sur.
age,
Yeah.
You're age 20, and are you already making dulcimers then?
Yeah. Yeah.
What age did you start making dulcimers?
20. That's when I started. Maybe I was 21. Yeah, I was 20.
It's
Yeah.
right at the beginning when you were making them. Yeah.
Well, what happened was the Big Sur Folk Festival was going to happen, and I told everybody I was going to make an instrument for her, and they laughed at me. Not for her, for the festival, and I was going to sell it to either her or the Incredible String Band. And so I sold it to her. And
How much?
how much money?
Yeah.
$200, which was a huge amount for a dulcimer in 1968.
Wow.
Yeah.
1968.
Yeah.
And this is called a mountain dulcimer as opposed to a hammer dulcimer. Is there same thing?
Yeah. There's two of them behind me. Oh, wait, that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go on, because we're going to get into music soon, but I want to get these
these intellectual questions, these philosophical, intellectual questions.
So were you raised a particular religion?
I was raised Jewish. Yeah. Reform.
Do you pray?
I do, actually. I pray. Yes.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I knew this was going to be fun. Well, first of all, I don't think God speaks in any language. I don't think. After I die, I'll just be one with God. God's not going to say anything to me. I'll just
be one with him, or be one with God. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll just be absorbed.
I got a good one, Joellen. Says,
okay.
He goes, "I'll give you $150 for that dulcimer you sold Joni Mitchell." Instead of her, did she pay you $200?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. And that's what you asked for. She didn't try to, finagle. Yeah.
No.
Okay. So do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I really don't know.
So
I don't know whether evil is a cultural construct.
Yeah.
Or whether it's really something in itself. It certainly is anti-society. Evil is defined by something that harms society or harms people. So, but whether
Well,
it
it's
exists,
yeah. It's actually the hidden question or the follow up is
okay.
how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. It's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you acknowledge, empower them?
You just, the last 5 words, blurbed.
Yeah,
Say them
it
again.
goes like this. How would you respond to Alan Watts before you answer the question, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? How would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I think that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
Because we have pieces of our enemy internally.
Yeah.
So if you don't acknowledge your enemy, you're discounting a piece of yourself and your membership in the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. So just in general, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy?
Kill him.
Wow. So,
That was a joke. That was a joke.
Listen, I've been shocked how many people I said shoot them. They're not joking. And I mean, I it's hard for me to not respond. I'm not here to like argue with them. So when someone said shoot them, I didn't go, dude, I'm anti-gun and I'm a pacifist. I don't want to hear that. I let them say it. So I'm glad you said it.
But here's the thing. That's what everybody wants to do with
Yeah.
their enemy. They want to destroy them.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out how to deal with your enemies. I mean, some people do shoot them and kill
They
them.
do indeed. But it's here's the follow-up. What do we do with our enemy when we catch him, let's say, or we bust him or throw him in jail? Nicholas Taleb said games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't really know who won or lost, but we can tell who a hero is. So then someone responded to that and said, well, villains don't think they are bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson said, when a criminal gets caught, they go, he asked the question, do they go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? Or do they go, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day I got caught? So does punishment work is the basic question, but you can go off on any direction of these various things I just said.
Well, you can't lump all evil. You can't lump all crimes in the same bucket.
Yeah.
There's just different kinds of crimes and there's different, I see things a little bit anthropologically and also like a herd.
Yeah.
There are certain types of individuals that are created in the human race, that genetically they come out of the womb, and there are just certain types of characters that come out.
Yeah.
There's people who want power. Sometimes they become leaders, and sometimes they become the enemy.
Yeah.
I don't know whether sadism and masochism are created by trauma, but I think, you watch kids killing bugs. Now, some kids are taught not to kill bugs.
Yeah.
But you see kids usually triumphing over something smaller than them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a natural kind of instinct
Yeah.
to fight back against one's littleness,
Yeah.
whether you're a baby and you're surrounded by adults, or you're an adult and surrounded by a world that doesn't do what you want it to do.
Amazing. Yeah. You fight littleness. That is so
Yeah,
that's doesn't matter what your parents say, you're gonna say, wait a minute. So
that's right.
that's quite astounding. So what oh here's the next one. Sorry. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I love that question. That's wonderful. Well, that's a great question. That is a great question. Let's stick with the tree. Okay, so let's say I look at a tree.
Yeah.
And then Van Gogh paints a tree.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at Van Gogh's tree, I see something in the tree that I didn't see on my own.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I like that.
You see new things with new eyes. That's like I think it's Cezanne or Matisse said, if you paint your painting and you put it in the bushes and it blends in, it's a good painting. So it's almost like the opposite of what you just said. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, is that a painting or is that
But that's okay. That's okay too.
That's okay too. That's amazing.
If you want to honor a bush by painting it exactly as you see.
Yeah.
Cool. Because what an artist sees, like I will look at something and I'll see it differently than another person who looks at it.
Yeah.
So if I paint that bush and that person looks at it, they're going to see a lot more than they saw before. Not everybody. I mean, I think that's pretty far out that none of us really see exactly the same thing.
Exactly. That's amazing.
And we don't hear the same thing either when it comes to music.
Hello.
People
So
don't even hear the same thing in this interview. If people out there listening to this,
right,
they're not even hearing what you and I are hearing. I mean,
right,
and
that's good, but it's also there's various ways they can interpret it by writing comments or telling us later, blah blah blah. So this is where I'm really anxious. This has been truly enlightening. I appreciate this so much, Joelle. Tell me the tipping points on these three things, because you're sort of like you're many things, but we're just going to isolate these three. When did you go, I'm going to play music? You're growing up, you're hearing music. I want to pursue that. That's a calling. I want to do that. A tipping point for that. A tipping point when you go, I'm going to build an instrument. Tipping point for being an instrument builder, and then a tipping point to be psychotherapist.
Okay, this is pretty easy.
Yeah.
So the first music I remember ever hearing, actually, I'm going to contradict myself. I remember that the first music I ever heard played on a musical instrument, not the radio, was my grandfather playing the mandolin.
Yeah.
And that was the first music I heard, and it definitely caught my attention.
About what age?
I have no idea. It could have been 2. It could have been 4.
Right.
Very early. Very early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I only remember him playing one song, which was Hatikva, the Jewish national anthem. That's the only thing I remember him playing. And then the next thing, of course, not of course, I was at a summer camp when I was 4 years old. And people were playing the guitar, and that was cool. But this woman was playing the accordion.
Yeah.
And this was probably also my sexual awakening. But there was something about her and her smile and the accordion and the music. That was the imprint. I like this word imprint because
Yeah.
I think your questions are about when does something make an imprint on
Yeah.
you? And
Yeah.
an imprint isn't one way. It's not like it evokes something inside of you that meets it.
Yeah.
So that's for music. When it comes to building instruments, when we moved from Brooklyn to Queens, we had a garage, and my father did woodwork. And I was very interested in it. But it wasn't until I was probably 10, they put me in ballet class. And I looked around at myself in this little leotard. And I said, no, this is not me. And I got out of the leotard and went down the hall. It was some kind of kids' school on the Saturday. And there was a woodworking class. And I went in the woodworking class and I started making stuff out of wood.
Amazing.
But then it wasn't until 1966 where a friend of mine came back from college and she had made 2 dulcimers. And I had this epiphany. The epiphany had 2 parts. One was that musical instruments were made. They didn't just appear.
Yeah.
Somebody actually made them. And the second, in 1965, was that a woman could make them.
Wow. Heavy.
So that was the turning point. And I decided one day I would build an instrument, a dulcimer.
Wow.
But I hadn't, and I had already heard Richard Frenia play at the Newport Folk Festival. I heard that concert where he played, and he died the next year.
Wow.
And that music did something to me. That was like my calling. So, but between my friend having built a dulcimer and hearing Richard Frenia, I was on that path. Yeah.
Now that kickover point for you go to college and you study psychotherapy, where's your tipping?
No.
Okay. I mean, where's the tipping point to be a psychotherapist?
That's much later. So I want to tell you something about my trajectory to get to that point. A little prequel. So when I went to college, I enrolled in pre-med.
Wow.
And I wanted to be a neurobiologist, a neurophysiologist, and prove that there was no such thing as love.
Oh my God.
That it was just all neural junk. You can see I was not a happy camper. Anyway, so I studied pre-med for a year, and I was only 16. And my teacher, I had this teacher who was kind of mentoring me. And he said, you know, you're too emotionally immature to become a doctor. You should study something else. I was devastated, but he was actually right. So I started studying. Syracuse University had a really good anthropology department. So I started studying anthropology.
Yeah.
And that was great. I loved it. All the comparative cultural stuff.
Yeah.
Just blew my mind, you know, how different cultures operate.
Yeah.
And then I got bored with that for some reason. I decided to study psychology. And psychology was really boring. It was all about statistics and experiments. And by that time, I was also just kind of not knowing what I wanted to do. So I decided I majored in philosophy. So you can kind of hear that in some of the way I think about things.
Yeah.
And I really loved philosophy because it taught you how to think. And my favorite class was a class in constitutional law.
Wow.
Now, why? Because we had this fabulous teacher, and we would take the cases and what he taught us was that you could take any law and argue equally both sides of it using the Constitution.
Yeah.
And it all depended on your a priori beliefs.
Yeah.
And that has helped me throughout my entire life deal with people in psychotherapy. Because if you don't understand people's deepest beliefs, you don't understand why they're acting the way they do or thinking the way they do.
Yeah.
So now we have to fast forward to 1988, and my mother is dying of cancer. And I hear about bereavement counseling at Brotman Hospital, free bereavement counseling. And I was kind of tired of building instruments and just being alone in my shop covered in sawdust. So I took the bereavement class, and I was fascinated that somebody could teach me about the death and dying process. I was just amazed. And I had also been in a lot of psychotherapy by then because I was having a lot of problems. So I decided to see if I wanted to become a therapist. So I volunteered at the Alcoholism Center for Women downtown, and I liked it. So I went back to school in 1986, maybe 1984. I went back to school. Yeah.
So it took 4 years to get to be a psychotherapist or more?
No, it took me 2 years. And then I had to get my hours for 2 years.
Yeah.
1988, I got my license. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Really well done. It was super concise, and we could talk about everything you said there for hours, but let's move on.
Okay.
When you write, okay, there's two things about your creative process. Now we'll stick with the instrument building and music for a few minutes now here. When you write songs, do you write lyrics or mainly instrumentals?
I write both equally.
Oh, you write both. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So a screenwriting teacher told me a great art is when you can clearly see the maker, the intentions of the maker, excuse me. Stanley Kubrick says great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a song?
Very little. I'm an intuitive when it comes to that. I hear something, or I'm suffering, and some words come out that capture my suffering.
Okay, same question to designing an instrument. Like a dulcimer, your press kit is so good. It says experimental shapes in exquisite inlay. I mean, it's
exquisite.
exquisite. I got a good education, so I know how to mispronunciate words well. But this is it's not your just run of the mill. You've got something going there. When you're designing and executing an instrument, what role does intention play?
Well, I have an intention to build a dulcimer, so that creates a boundary, right? And usually there's always something. There's always a theme. My dulcimers always have a theme.
Each instrument has a theme?
Yeah. Like
wow.
The two behind me, the one on the, well, I don't know if your left and my left is the same, but the one that's over my shoulder is a pelican theme.
Right. You wrote the Pelican song about that. Yeah.
But the reason I wrote that, for example, I wasn't building much, and I was riding my bike down Venice Beach, not Venice Beach, below, below the jetty, El Segundo. Yeah. And I love the pelicans. I just think they're fabulous. And usually I see a few pelicans skimming the water. And I saw a line of pelicans. I had never seen that. Now, I just guessed. So I say it was like 30 pelicans in a line, and I had never seen anything like that. And they were going the same direction as me. And they flew really low, right over my head. I could feel their wings beating. And I said to myself, there's my next dulcimer.
Wow.
So that's not an intention. And let me give you another example. When I lived in Northern California, I had a little workshop behind a house. It was 3 walls were glass. It was a very interesting little room. And one day, a ram showed up with the full horns, just showed up in my workshop. And it had a tag, so I knew it was from a farm. But intuitively, I had this feeling like this is very biblical. Yeah, everything, when I started building dulcimers, everything became very symbolic.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, what is this about? But anyway, to make a long story short, a few years later, I built the ram dulcimer. I was searching around for a theme for a dulcimer, and I looked through National Geographic, and there was a fabulous picture, the face of a ram. And if you go to my website, you can see the ram.
Yeah.
And that actually there was one before that where I started doing the complex inlays on the peg heads. And the first one I did was what I call a musical self-portrait. It's the Jester. And so that one, I decided, well, it has a very, it has a very Renaissance look, but the nose is very Semitic, and there's a big earring for African rhythm and music.
Yeah.
So it's like this inlay contains all these elements of because I have a very varied musical background. I love traditional folk music. I love classical music. I grew up playing classical music. I love band music. I love world music. I studied Arabic music and Indian music.
Klezmer.
I play klezmer, and I studied it for many years and have 2 klezmer bands. Had one, and now I have another called Schmaltz. So, for example, I have a tune. So a lot of the instrumentals I write are more symphonic in the sense that they have several movements. Most folk songs, maybe a chorus and a verse, maybe a bridge. But the way I hear music in my head is more from the classical world. Like I'll play a part of something will emerge, and then that takes me somewhere else. And then it takes me somewhere else, And eventually it ends. But like a friend of mine said, do you think of what chord structure you're going to use? She's a musician. I said, not at all. I hear the music in my head. And then I try to write it down or record it. Yeah. So
that's in my head. We're going to get to that very thing. Well, let's just do that right now. A poet said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Thinking. My inner dialogue is all thinking.
Wow. Okay. So now McLuhan said, now we'll finally get into music. Thank God. Okay. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. He says human sensorium. So knife and fork extend our teeth. Clothing extends our skin, and even non-tangible like religion or philosophy might extend consciousness. What does the dulcimer extend for you? What humanness?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is joy.
Wow, that was great. Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny thing. I was very depressed from high school to maybe 2021.
Yeah.
But the music that I wrote was always joyous. So my muse, or wherever it comes from, is this amazing joy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you went to my website, but there's a song called Dance and Sing.
Yeah.
It's really very just joyous.
Yeah. So you think that's like your self-therapy, it's your healing, or it's just the natural flow? You're saying, well, I'm depressed, so I'm going to heal through this. I mean, is that part of it? It's like,
No, I don't think anything about it. That's just what comes out.
that's just what comes up. So Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. When you're writing a song, how much are you thinking of your listener?
Very little.
Yeah.
I'm my own audience at that moment. It has
What's
to
the,
please me.
it has to please you. What's the function of music?
The function. I just think it's a different form of speech. But there is another function of music. You know, music is healing.
Yeah.
Music creates community.
Yes.
And so does football.
Yeah.
And basketball. I love basketball. It's cathartic.
Yep.
It's pleasant. It's beautiful. I mean,
What's more fundamental, music or language?
I think they're both languages.
Yeah. So this is another McLuhan thought, probe actually. It's not a theory, but he said song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
You know, I've read that. I wish I could remember who said that, but that's a really interesting comment. Oh, I know who it was. Oh, this bass player who wrote these 2 books. I wish I could remember his name.
You mean he said it in his own words, or he quoted McLuhan?
No, he said it in his own words. He was talking about.
When you figure it out, let me know, because I would love to know, because it's very interesting, because McLuhan got all his thoughts and probes from other people. He didn't say I made this up, but he would regurgitate them. So that's very interesting. So what's your take? The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
I think that's an oversimplification. Let me tell you why.
Yeah, please.
If I live in India, if I live in Australia, what I hear on a daily basis, one thing that got me when I was in Australia is the bird sounds.
Yeah.
It was like a symphony every day. I mean, there was so much singing, bird singing. So if you live in that environment versus New York City, you know, that's what you're hearing. So you're not only hearing language, you're hearing the earth, you know. So where you live in the earth, if I live in India, in the rural areas, I've never been to India. I don't know what that would sound like. But I guarantee you, wherever there's a train, there's sounds of train in people's music.
Oh, well, this is, you led perfectly into the next question. Then listen to this. They asked Sun Ra, you know, you studied with Fletcher. No, you were the arranger for Fletcher Henderson. Did you learn from Fletcher? You know, and Sun Ra goes, no, I learned from the crickets and the birds. Same with Eric Dolphy. He says, where'd you get your sound? He goes, I used to listen to the crickets right here in East LA. He would just walk outside and listen. So yeah, let's go to this question, because you anticipated so well. So 2 of my film heroes say there is no self-expression. Jonas Mekas says, you know, ignore yourself, or he says the same sort of thing, ignore yourself. But Cecil Taylor, the jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me.
Mhm.
So I know it's a stupid question. It's both, but it's just a prompt. Is music making, art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever cultures, technologies, and environments are dominant?
Oh, your question went somewhere I didn't expect. I thought you
Yeah.
were going somewhere else with the question.
But it's like when you said I'll tell you that to suss out the vehicle thing, you said, you're hearing the birds. That's the environment in Australia, and you can't. And then you said a train. So James Brown's drummer in Ohio, he invented funk drumming basically. And they said, "Where'd you get your sound?" He goes, "Well, there was a factory on one side of my house and a train on my other side of my house." So it was like boom, boom. He's hearing these two things. So I'm just sort of sussing out, is it more self-expression or more you're a vehicle or a channel for this environment?
Well, you're bringing up such an interesting question because it's how. Hold on. Because how we define the self.
Yeah.
If we define the self as kind of a sponge
Yeah.
that has a shape, if you think of an undersea sponge, they have a very
Yeah.
uneven shape.
Yeah.
But the sponge, I have a question. Like, if a sponge is underwater,
Yeah.
does it contain the maximum amount of water it can absorb?
Right.
It's just kind of a question. But anyway,
Ask Bob. Yeah. If a sponge underwater, that's one of those. That's like you go up to the guru and you go, "What's the best question I can ask you?" And the guru goes, "The one you just asked me."
but anyway, so if the self, this is a fascinating question for a psychotherapist, and
Yeah.
it relates to the question about the soul.
Yeah.
Because if the self is constructed both from an energy field, a cultural field, a
Yeah.
genetic field, I mean, it's constructed about all these things. It has tendencies. But for me, music, there's a thing that happens in music. It's like, Hannah, you start to play. And all of a sudden, when you're playing, something changes.
Yeah.
And you're in the music. You're inside of music.
Yeah.
And you see it with students too, when you're teaching them music. And they start out, they're just learning how to hold the pick, how to hold the dulcimer. And all of a sudden, they actually play a song. They actually play music.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess it's like when a kid babbles and then they become 2 years old and they start putting sentences together, but as a musician, I've always felt that you tap into something else,
Yeah.
another level of energy or another dimension of energy that comes out of the music. So at that point, it's not just self-expression.
Yeah.
It's universe expression. It's kind of like, we can only use metaphors to try to describe it,
Yeah. Yeah, that's poet says, when I talk to you, I got to use words. And that's McLuhan says all words are metaphorical. Even I'm an etymological freak. And my favorite is when they go, this word is of unknown origin. It's like every word is unknown origin. In fact, okay, let's follow up with this because I want to ask you this thing that follows purpose. First, can art making, music making be egoless?
Egoless.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great. That was just easy. Sure. Well,
and you're really lucky when that happens.
Well, believe me, Joelle, I'll tell you, 80% of people goes, no, it can't be egoless. And then a woman about a year ago says, great art is egoless. And then a woman about a month ago says, it has to be egoless. And you just go, sure, yeah, right. That's easy. That's a no-brainer. But Charlie Hayden plays old Joe Clark in the middle of a solo on Ornette Coleman. And I didn't know the song. I'm sorry, I didn't know the song title. I knew it was some old song. And I was talking to him once and I says, what is that song? He goes, Old Joe Clark. I says, who wrote it? And he goes, nobody wrote it. And I love that. I wanted to get your feeling.
Somebody wrote it, but we have no idea.
It was passed down. And it's like Waters of March, the same thing. So many people have morphed it, and then somebody claims the arrangement, so they go, I'm the writer, because they got to have intellectual property or whatever. But it is a funny thing how, who writes songs, and then, like back to Oscar Wilde, he says, everything's in public domain. Yeah. But we want to say, oh, so-and-so wrote this song. But back to music, my friend says, on the taste thing, the word taste, this brings up another thing about music. My friend says the 3 T's of music are taste, technique, and theory. So you know how to play the dulcimer. You know how to do it. You know the theories, chords, or, how does one acquire taste?
I just don't think that way. I just don't use that word. That's not a concept.
But you gravitated towards klezmer, and maybe not. I mean, I know you tackle a lot of genres, or you're into a lot of genres, but you will go, don't you sometimes say I like that and I don't like that? It's sort of like taste might not be the word I'm after with you, is aesthetic. How do you form and say, okay, that's a good song, I want to play that again? How do you
just like it? I mean, it's kind of like you go to the store and you taste 5 flavors of ice cream and you pick one.
Yeah.
You don't think about it. It's just, you like it.
You mean it's more a gut thing? So back to the Freud thing, it's more gut. It's more intuitive. Is taste like,
well, it depends on the person, like somebody who's that guy, Glass? That piece where he just sits at the piano and doesn't do anything for a minute?
No, that's John Cage. Yeah. 432.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
432.
Now, okay, great. He became very famous for that song.
Yeah.
But would I buy that song and play it when I'm in my shop working? No, I wouldn't play that.
Which is funny because I've studied that song for 50 years. And he started at the Santa Monica Women's Club in the I think it's 1953 he didn't play that, but he started his career. But it did chart on the English pop charts about 10 or 15 years ago. So there it is. You're like, well, I'll play this. Like the Bulgarian, I'll play the Bulgarians Women Choir, which also charted on the English pop charts. Not, this is like pop music, and they played it, and it made, so.
But here's the deal. Like, the word taste is usually associated with food.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you develop taste in food? You try different things. Maybe somebody tells you about it. If you go, yuck, this is awful. And somebody says, well, no, I want you to try it again. And then I want you to listen to your tongue, how earthy it is, how different it is from, so you can learn taste. Somebody can help you understand something that seems foreign to you.
Yeah. Well, that's that. Most people say exposure. That's how you get taste. But
Oh,
it's,
that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying this is interesting because when you say listen to your tongue, that's called sense ratio shifting. And that's your shifting that, or it's synesthesia.
Mhm.
Like I hear what you're saying, or I see what you're saying. Well, you don't see what you're saying. You hear what the person's saying, but they say we see, meaning that's, oh, I understand it.
Right.
So what
Yeah.
you shift the senses.
Right.
So Copeland divides the main elements of music for melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. How do you juggle those or navigate those when you're composing a song? Because I know rhythm, there's somewhere where you said something about rhythm, and there's a lot going on in a dulcimer
Yeah. Well,
rhythmically.
I'm known for, I mean, I'm known for my rhythm. That's
Right.
one of the areas which I'm known for.
But how do you navigate the four when you're, say, writing a song? Do you start a certain, it just, there's no like
I hear
emphasis, you're
music in my head. I hear it. I hear it. I hear the music. And then I play it. And then, so maybe I'll increase the volume. I'll stretch out the melody, or I'll play with the rhythm. All of the elements are okay. So what happened to me is I played classical and band music until I went to Big Sur.
What instruments were you playing then?
My first instrument was accordion.
In
And
in
then,
the okay.
so when I was 7 years old, I started taking accordion lessons in elementary school.
Yeah.
And I was the only one who finished the class. I was the only one who finished. That was interesting to me. Maybe nobody else cares, but I loved it. I just loved it.
Yeah.
And we had an accordion orchestra in elementary school.
Oh, I see.
And then when I got to junior high, they considered the accordion a non-instrument. They considered it a bastard instrument.
Wow.
So they wouldn't let me in the orchestra. So I had to take up a different instrument. I took up the clarinet. Now it ended
Oh
up
my
being a
wow.
really good thing, because later when I played klezmer, I played the clarinet. So I played the clarinet all through junior high school and high school. And then in the 60s, I started playing the guitar because the folk thing was happening. The
Yeah.
Greenwich Village folk thing was happening.
Yeah.
And I was right there in New York, And but it wasn't until I heard Richard Farina and I
Right.
moved to Big Sur that I started building dulcimers and then started playing them. So
Right.
I don't think about those four elements.
Right. They're all blended together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all what I hear.
Yeah. Miles Davis talks about the space between notes. How do you navigate that dynamic?
That's
When
one of the
not,
most important things.
how did you know when to not play? People, everybody overplays, in my opinion, but it's hard to have really pure dynamics, I think, in knowing when not to play. How do you figure that out?
I think that's part of the art. I mean, it's kind of like there's a rhythm. Like when I teach people rhythm, the first rhythm that you learn on the dulcimer is just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, front, back, front, back. But the second rhythm, it's front, there's a space, and then front, back. And so I spent a lot of time telling people that they have to create that space. It doesn't just happen. It's not a nothing.
Yeah.
And so you create space, and you can really drag it out to the last minute, just like in basketball when they're down to 2 seconds and they shoot the shot. You can drag that space out, and that's how you get swing. Jazz rhythms and swing is a lot of
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. That's you said a great line. It is not a nothing. That's Alfred
Right.
E. Newman in Mad Magazine. He says the English language is the only language where a double negative is a no-no. It is not a nothing. Okay, so then Monk, Thelonious Monk says, there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
I disagree.
Thank God.
But I know what he's saying. I know
Yeah.
what he's saying, but I don't think that's accurate. If I'm trying to play a song somebody wrote
Yeah.
and I hit a sharp where it's a natural, that's a wrong note.
Yeah.
But I know what he's saying. On another level,
Yeah.
we have a saying: if you hit that wrong note, hit it two more times, and it
Yeah.
becomes improvisation. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. The great Duggo in Venice, my favorite artist, said Monk heard all the same notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them. You know, like them. So Ben Ratliff is a music writer. He says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard in a single note. So me and you could hear like one note of Miles Davis and, oh, that's Miles, you know. And so Ben said Miles was fragile and pointed. His sound was fragile and pointed. He says Coltrane is slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer that you really respected was going to describe Joellen's sound in a couple words, what two words would you feel they got it? They you know, you would be honored and you really felt that they sort of nailed the Joellen sound.
Well, the first word that came to my mind is kaleidoscope.
Oh my God, that's a good word. You want to leave it there or you want to add one more?
Let's see if no other word has popped up yet.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Well, give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a
Okay,
second.
go ahead.
Okay, kaleidoscope. Well, so it would be a kaleidoscopic sound that spans gentle and fierce.
That's great. Beautiful.
I should write that down. I should use that in my promo.
You should definitely. It's at
Except
the
I don't know how to spell kaleidoscope.
I know you should see how I scribbled it. But thank God we got Google. It's at the hour 18 minute.
Okay.
But that's funny because we got 12 more minutes. I asked for 90. Can you go longer or you got to run?
A little bit longer. Sure. I'm having a really good time.
Okay. What was the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch or your guess?
Boy, I had a series of words go through my head. The first one was awe. The second one was love.
Yeah.
And the third one would be food.
It's really good. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
I want to write that down. That would be a great song.
That is awe,
love and food.
Food. Yeah. Well, I always said the function of, you know, they always say, well, if you draw a picture of the deer on the wall, then you'll be able to catch it the next day. Or, you know, you draw a picture of the deer on the wall because that's what you hunted for the day. But it's, you know, we don't know, and it can go so many ways. But I always says, It was to get people to come to your cave, so you put out some wine and cheese and crackers, so it's food. It's like,
It
come to
was
my
decoration. It was
yeah,
decoration.
come to my art opening. There'll be free food.
Well, there was no paint. There was no wallpaper. So you, you want to make
No,
the
it
cave
really
interesting.
one of my best answers I got was to keep people in the cave. Okay, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
They're both important.
Good. Is perception reality?
Mm-hmm.
Lewis Carroll says, I
Well,
believe.
I want to add something to that. Yes and no.
Very good. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Lately. I don't quite know how to answer that. I mean, I think I'm retiring from psychotherapy at the end of April.
Okay.
And I want to do more instruments and music. So I think the impossible thing that I'm focusing on is, having this resurgence of having no idea what it would look like, but also, God, here's where language is so weird. Just having more of a music and instrument making career.
Yeah.
But not knowing what that would look like.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. So, what's one major element that's changed in your years of being creative, let's say in the music world, creating instruments, writing songs, playing music? One major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed in the years you've done that?
The first time I carved something on a dulcimer, it was the second dulcimer I made. I think it was made out of birch.
Yeah.
I carved a flower. Like I lived in Big Sur, one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah.
And so the change that happened is I never thought I had any artistic talent. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, hey, maybe I do.
Yeah.
And now I actually believe that I have artistic talent.
That's perfect answer to that. I mean, you really set up, but now sort of flip is Moshe Feldenkrais, or it's not a flip, it's a sort of extension. Moshe Feldenkrais says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, I think my well, I think for most of my life, I didn't really connect with people. And now I understand that that part of me is the part of me now that is my intuitive part. I thought it was something negative, but
Right.
it was a part of me that was prominent.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of get back in touch with it once I learned how to connect with people.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's, you know, it's almost like what Jean Cocteau said, when you make your first piece of art, whatever it is, and your family and your teachers go, well, it's good, but, you know, you should work on this. Whatever the criticism is, take that and exploit it from the rest of your career. So it's you get in touch. That's McLuhan's main thing is how do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough, a rejection into a redirection, you know? Or like Iggy Pop said, my band was so bad imitating the Rolling Stones, we invented punk rock.
Well, here's another one. This is good. I have a terrible memory.
Yeah.
So I never have been able to remember lyrics.
Yeah.
Or melodies.
Yeah.
So I end up improvising.
There you go. That's a good example.
Yeah, that's a really good example.
Yeah. And you learn how to improvise. But see, you do have the language in you. And you have, you know, that's what all the great musicians I interview, they go, don't think. It's like, yeah, right. That sounds good. But you can't play music and not think. But they want to get to that state where you're not thinking. You're flowing with the, you know, but there's still something, you know. In fact, this is a funny sort of follow-up, but I'm curious. You are what you resist. No, you create what you resist, is the saying. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. And James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel said, thank God I'm an atheist. So
that's the best one.
That's the best one, definitely. Yeah, 5 words. But what's your feelings on this thought? You create what you resist. I'm not saying you, Joellen, but one creates what one resists. Any feelings on that thought?
Well, first of all, you're taught to resist certain things.
Yeah.
And then you also naturally are repelled by certain things.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to learn by doing the reverse, you know, reversing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I never have thought about you are what you did, or you know, I'm not that dogmatic.
Yeah.
But
well, it's sort of like you are what you hate is like someone points at their friend, they go, you're stingy. And it's really because you know that the person saying it is stingy. So they want to say the other person lacks, you know, or you're greedy. It's like, well, no, I always go, who are you? The greed police? I mean, everybody's greedy in a way, you know. How do you find peace of mind?
Well, usually it comes by itself. Nice. But there's so many ways. There's just so many ways. You know, a friend of mine said this thing once. She said the way she prays, she goes out of the house and she says, God, wow me. And what's really interesting about that, not that I do it all the time, if you walk out of your door and you look at wherever you live, and then you say that, when you look again, you see something different. Definitely. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I just try to be in the present and accept what is and get out of the way of oncoming traffic.
Be here now. That's beautiful. In fact, Wyndham Lewis really nailed it. He says, artists live in the present, be here now, and write a detailed history of the future. Because all times are happening now. I mean, both Joyce and Zappa said that. It's like it's all at once. Okay, these are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in a few words. First one: who started it all?
Obama.
Are we going to make it?
No.
Where do we put it?
In our hearts,
Who's cleaning it up?
we are.
Is it serious?
Mm-hmm.
Really cool, Joellen. I just got a few more and we're out of here. This has been super fun. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old?
I have to remember where I was when I was 12. Hold on. So I was in 9th grade. Oh, God. Oh. I think I would just say, hang in there.
Yeah,
It's going to get better.
good. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
Why?
Because I like it that way.
The patent has it going that way, but 95% people say over, but the people who say under, they have their reasons.
I'm sure they. What are some of their reasons?
Oh, they say the wall or this or that. I mean, it's so funny. Okay, if a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
The first word that came to mind was me.
Me is a good title. That's short and okay. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh, what's that flower? Well, oh, wait. What comes before daffodils? Narcissus? No. Is it narcissus? No. There's a flower that blooms right before the daffodils come up. It has a very pungent smell.
Yeah, before daffodils. That's enough with the flower that blooms before daffodils. Okay. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Well, it definitely would be made of wood.
Yes. And where? Where would you want it displayed?
It's funny. The first thing that came to mind was Brooklyn.
Good. Can you forget to die?
I forget to die all the time.
That's good. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
A piece of the Eiffel Tower.
Man, you're knocking them out of the park, man. There's no you've answered them all. I just got a couple more. This is fun. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Pragmatic politics.
Wow. Put that in a layperson's terms. What does that mean? Just in a few words.
Helpful policies.
Yeah. I gotta give a bonus because I know you probably know this. Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
I like that question. We're all entitled to make the rules.
Yes.
Yeah. That goes back to your earlier questions about, do artists have to be moral?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Anthony Burgess, writer and a musician, said, "We must now ask some very different questions about the relationship between music and life." It seems as though in a lot of ways you do what I tell students sometimes: get your life and your job as mixed up as possible. And it's you live music and music lives you. What's a question that remains unresolved for you about music and life?
I have no idea. What's a question that music and life?
But it also is just I'll just ask the next question because I'll probably come out there. And it's sort of like, what question remains unresolved for you? But let's put it in these terms. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time." You yeah, I love your laugh. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Exploring the mystery of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Exploring the mystery, because beautifully, so well put, because Auden the poet said, "The mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us." And, that's the beauty, is like, well, pacifying someone isn't a bad thing. You can relax, or you can make you dance, So I love that. Explore the mystery. What gives you the most optimism?
Honest politicians.
Nice. The first question, Joellen, was, what's the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. In fact, you sort of said that, things and people, and you talked about the challenge in this exploration. And then the last question is, what gives you the most optimism? I got that from what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people.
Really? That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, so it's been a pleasure and a joy, really, for spending this time with you. And I really thank you. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and keeps going on forever and ever.
It was a pleasure. It was really fun. I had so much fun.
Well, it reminded me of when I asked Kelly Carlin, George Carlin's daughter, all these same questions. She would crack up, like laugh like you would. Then she would take a deep breath, and then she would talk, And I mean, that's really, I'm out to have fun, but at the same time, I learned so much, and I can't wait Monday to tell my young group what I learned. Thank you for that. That was truly insightful.
Okay, Jerry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really just delicious experience.
Super.